Well, a special good night to everyone. It's day, I don't know what, in the lockdown and in the vote count. I'm losing count of these days. Every day, like I tell my friends and my family, every day feels like Sunday now. So it must be Sunday, or it might be Thursday. I don't know. But welcome.
Yeah.
Hi, Salam, are you there? Just 1 second as we reconnect with Salam.
We're expecting a lot of money from oil. Um, we
Right,
have,
I guess I'm back now.
yeah, we have COVID, and we have an economic infrastructure that is unfit at this time to power this nation because
Mhm.
it's not working in the right direction. So I'm making the opening statement, Saleh.
Oh, that's good.
Our
That's good.
challenge basically is to confront these big rocks
Mhm.
and harness them to basically unleash our human and natural resources to transform the living standards of our people. So that's the way I see it. I mean, that is the risk that Guyana face, and we have to navigate these difficult waters. But be clear, Guyana, we can navigate these waters. All that is required is leadership. That is all that is required. Proper
Yes.
leadership, and we can craft enough policies to navigate these turbulent waters.
Well, thanks a lot for improvising and doing what I guess you would have done anyway, to introducing your making opening statements. Well, on Nicholas, I want to congratulate you. You became president of GCCI again. So
You know,
um, I think they wanted to put the pressure on a broad shoulder. At this time when so much is happening, and that's going to definitely impact your membership. So tell us a bit on your end about the shutdown, about COVID itself, and the response by the business community, and your general assessment about how this pandemic might be affecting your membership.
Thanks for that. And so first, let me say good evening to yourself, Sis, all your listeners, both in Guyana and in the diaspora. Thanks for the congratulations. It has been a pleasure working with my colleagues over the past year, and I'm very
Mhm.
heartened that they wanted to give me a second and final chance at leading the chamber this year. It is challenging, and it's an interesting time because, as Say said, we're almost into 2 months from the day that we had our election on March 2nd without a result, and then on
Mhm.
March 10th we had our patient zero for the COVID-19 virus, and today I think the latest update was that we had our eighth death
Mhm.
and we have just above 80 cases. I forget where it is, 82 or 80, because it was about four more from the 78, so about 82 cases of persons testing positive for COVID-19. Now, a lot of us are looking at the amount of testing being done. So we are particularly suspicious that the numbers may be a little bit lower than the actual infected population. And this would be something that's natural for most countries across the world because you're never going to be able to test every last person who has it. But we suspect in Guyana, given the quantum of testing being done, let's say per capita, that you probably have a higher infection rate than the 84 number is giving you an indication of. To that effect, we saw this evening the government, the caretaker government, putting an extension in of the stay-at-home orders until June 3rd, which of course for the members of the diaspora means that the airports remain closed, and for the locals, it means a lot of non-essential businesses remain closed. Recently, I was
curve. No, Guyana seems to be ahead. So that's very, very interesting. But
yeah,
Yeah, I'm having some
My-
difficulties here.
them in the US versus Guyana. So
Yeah,
maybe GP finally got it right.
yeah, I think it's some kind of bug in my system that's not allowing Skype to perform. And I've used the system so many times. Yeah. So what happened when I left?
Well, Nick was making his opening statement about COVID.
Yeah. And I know I had like 2 days ago we were talking with Ramesh Prasad from iPad, and we had another guest there too, and we were talking about COVID and the whole the idea of the stimulus. I know in the U.S. the lockdown, which meant that you can't go to work or you can't conduct business, but the economy still needs to be maintained. So many countries have some sort of stimulus arrangement where citizens as well as businesses can be kept afloat, whether it's a grant or a loan that becomes a grant. I don't sense much of that happening in Guyana. Is it? What's the issue? Is it that the private sector is not vocal enough on this issue? Is it that I know Guyana's economy has been on its has been stalled for the past 18 months. We had a no confidence motion, then we had an election, then we had the COVID pandemic, then now oil prices stepping in. So there's a chain of activities that.
Yeah, so I think we could kind of get where Salim was going, say so, and if he keeps reconnected, this can't be. I think we could have some discussion.
Yeah,
For what I have seen being on the ground here in Guyana from the no confidence motion through the court case, through first the battlefront announcement of the election, then the actual election. Business from the time of the no confidence motion kind of started to slow down. You've got to understand. So let's look at Guyana as having its real, everyday, natural Guyanese economy, and then having this oil and gas industry that was, kind of operating in parallel with this real everyday economy. And the thing is that the oil and gas industry was creating a lot of noise because it was creating a lot of upward pressure. You had a lot
Mhm.
of buzz, a lot of activity, a lot of interest in from foreign direct investors to put money into the country. Real estate prices were rising.
Mhm.
Rentals from real estate investments were looking very good. So that was creating some buzz. But locally, from the United in No Confidence motion, every normal, average Guyanese business person was kind of holding back on investment because they wanted to see how things were going to play out. It's something natural. I mean, whenever you live in these developing countries and you go into an election period, people are very cautious because of how contentious our elections can be. So people, business persons were already starting to hold back on investment, waiting for the outcome of the election. And then we go into the election, and then now we don't have an outcome election, and now we have the coronavirus. So it was like having a very long lead up and then straight into the perfect storm. And right now, it's kind of feeling how we feel is like we're in the eye of the hurricane. It seems calm and quiet, but you know that eye wall is coming for you at some point. And people have been able to shelter in place for the past month and survive it, but very soon they're going to get to the breaking point. And we need a legitimate government in place who are fully empowered because our last budget was in November 2018. So spending has been trickling, right?
Mhm.
We have questions surrounding whether we're going to get the 5 million US that was applied for from the World Bank. We have questions surrounding whether we'll be able to access the royalties and the fund proceeds from the sale of the oil that the government did in January because of the status of the government.
Mhm.
So we are going into this pandemic that every other country in the world has been united against and working to fight. We're going in with one hand tied behind our backs and an elections commission that is hemming and hawing and just not doing what it's supposed to do for us to get on as a country.
Yeah, and Sis, I want to bring you on this discussion too. Does a caretaker government can they launch a stimulus package or not? Do they have the legal and financial abilities to get that done at this stage of the game?
Well, all the rules on the books are saying April 30th is a drop dead date for them. And they can only continue with what you call routine expenditure. And this is one of the reasons why the Team Granger has been struggling to do what the rest of the world has been doing. Because what is really essential and what the best practices we've seen around the world is many countries have started to take active steps of implementing the three S's, which is support in the short, financial and
Mhm.
other policy support in the short term, a set of measures that are stimulate the economy in the medium term, but with a view of sustainable growth of the economy over the long term. So support, stimulate, and sustainably grow the economy. Guyana is not being able to effectively support the economy in the short term. And I want to celebrate one good thing that I've seen happening in Guyana. When the CDC announced that they were going to cease the distribution of food hampers and to the most vulnerable in society, I saw Dr. Irfan Ali launched a program to add to his already the program that he has a national task force that distributed over 130,000 masks. But he immediately bolted on another support mechanism to start getting to these most vulnerable in society by distributing food hampers. I understand as of now, over 20,000 food hampers have been distributed. So it is appearing as if Dr. Irfan Ali is running a government within the country, while the the caretaker regime is abandon their duties. But I'll tell you something. This is the best practice that the world is doing. They're doing what you call the 3Ts in this COVID crisis. They're testing, they're tracing, and they're treating. And they're doing it pretty effectively. Initially, I think our authorities didn't get it, which is they were testing too few people. We need to test and test more, and we need to set up checkpoints in and out of the epicenter of Guyana. Let's be clear, the epicenter of Guyana is Georgetown. I've traveled in distributing food hampers and masks throughout the length and breadth of this country, and I'll tell you something. Guyana is not doing so badly out there, but where it really is struggling is in Region 3 and Region 4, which is West Demerara and East Demerara. So Demerara in particular, and of course Upper Demerara, which is Linden. Demerara in particular is struggling on the COVID, and we need to test more people in Demerara to make sure that we can treat them, and this was not being done effectively. We need to also build, Dr. Irfan Ali had actually stated this in a statement he made on April 20th. He said we need to build capacity in all 10 regions to decentralize the response to the COVID pathogen. And this is key because you don't want people traversing all over coming to the Georgetown Public Hospital for treatment if they have a fever. You want it to happen at the Linden Hospital, you want it to happen in the Saudi Hospital, you want it to happen in Berbice, and so forth, rather than them coming in a minibus and infecting that entire minibus if they have the COVID virus.
I know in the beginning of the task force operation, the COVID task force operation, there was tremendous amount of criticism in how they were rolling out their plans, who was managing it. It was very, very political. I know there's been some changes. Joe Harmon has taken some leadership role there. Nagamutu has already also taken some leadership role. Has the response to COVID by the current administration picked up? Is it addressing the core issues?
I'm in ground zero in Georgetown, Guyana, and I can tell you, changing from Nagamutu to Harmon is basically playing musical chair. The impact is zero. It's negligible from the state. The state is basically collapsed when it comes to responding in the short term to support this economy. I must confess that Georgetown Hospital has improved. The COVID doctors have basically gotten better, and that's good. That's good news. But the reality is they've also gotten a bit more PPEs for personal protective equipment. Mm-hmm. So the frontline workers at Georgetown Hospital is in a better shape right now, and hence they're doing their job. But this COVID pandemic is, in addition to a policy issue, it's a medical issue. There's no place there for a politician. That is why I am confused when I'm not seeing the chief medical officer leading the charge, and I'm seeing, I would designate a squatter in the Ministry of Health leading the charge in the form of Waldo Lawrence. We need a medical professional to lead this charge so that we can properly diagnose, understand, and treat the people who are tested as positive. And we need to accelerate. We have 10,000 kits in this country, and we have not tested 600 people. It's ridiculous. We need to test about 5,000 at this point in time, and we need to accelerate the testing. You know, they have something Singapore has done called contact tracing. So if I got the COVID, then everybody in my house is tested, all my neighbors are tested, everybody I came into contact with is tested, and that is a way of tracing who got this thing and helping. It's about attacking the virus rather than just playing politics with the virus.
Yeah, I know, Nicholas, there are some activities on the East Coast by the Ocean View International Hotel. I think a lot of viewers out there are not too sure what's happening there and what's intended to happen there. I mean, if you're going to build a hospital in the middle of a crisis, it sounds kind of weird. Is that old guy and he's saying you're ready to blah, you build a latrine only when you're ready to so and so. But tell me about what's going on there and what can we get out of it?
You give me the easy questions. So let me first add to what Sayes is saying is that you would expect that the response to the crisis would have been led by a medical technical professional. And if you look at the task force, it pretty much looks like the makeup of the cabinet, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you can understand there needing to be cross pollination because a lot of policies have to be put in place across various agencies. But you want to see medical professionals the same way you see, President Trump having Dr. Fauci in the forefront, right? Now, coming back to why that, is a pretext to what you asked me, is the fact that what has happened is that pretty much it looks like the Ministry of Finance is going to spend 5 million US on this Ocean View International property. There was a hotel previously, and I saw in their stay-at-home orders today, it looks like they're about to acquire the property, and then they're going to, they've already started the construction works and are investing this 5 million US into the property. I don't know, acquiring it under for the public good. The issue there is that the question is how long will it take them pumping this 5 million US into this property to bring it up to a fully functioning hospital where patients can, go lie down in the bed for the first time. And the problem is that the speed of construction in Guyana will dictate that a project like that is probably going to be finished somewhere in mid next year.
Yep.
If they finish before the end of this year, that will be a record in terms of the pace for Guyanese construction, and it's painful to look at because a lot of professionals, a lot of medical professionals, and a lot of other people who are trying to give me advice in terms of what to say publicly were saying, why didn't this money go into expanding the existing facilities that are government owned? Because it would have been faster to add wings onto the various hospitals or construct new additional sections to the existing hospitals to receive these patients in, rather than to go take this property that has been dormant and had several issues, gut it almost completely and restart to build a new hospital out of it. And the costs are, I was digging back obviously because the warranted comparison is the cost of the specialty hospital that the PPP had proposed in 2011. When you look at the headline figures that I saw in the news, the specialty hospital would have costed 18 million. So I was looking at that 18 million for a specialty hospital brand new as compared to 5 million going into this existing facility. And that was when the 5 million or the 1 billion Guyana dollars, 5 million US was talked about. It was talked about as, well, it's 5 million US for the construction works. That does not include acquisition costs and obviously didn't include any sort of equipment or needs to then get you running, right? Not including working capital for salaries and everything. But so when you look at it, was it the most efficient use of the public funds to fight this virus? And I don't think the answer is yes. I think the answer is no.
Salim, I just wanted to plug in a clarification there. Article 219 of the Guyana Constitution, 219.3 says, where at any time the parliament has been dissolved and provisions are not sufficiently made, the minister is authorized to withdraw from the consolidated fund expenditure to meet public service until the expiry of a period of 3 months from that dissolution date. Parliament was dissolved on January 10th. So clearly, April 30th will be a drop dead date. And the reality is, we were already in constitutional dark land. They should not be spending at this point in time as the way they should have. And this is the reality. So come tomorrow, what is going to happen? I mean, how are they going to run a country? Of course, they're going to bully their way. The problem is, I am appealing to the powers that be that they should call on all permanent secretaries to understand their constitutional authority. And failure to do that, they should be subjected to be surcharged under the law when the new government comes in. Somebody's going to have to eat this constitutional abuse. And if it has to be the accounting officers, so be it. You see, ministers, they sit in a space where they say, oh, we're the chairman of the board, we don't authorize spending. And quite rightly, that might be technically so. But you have a CEO of the ministry who is the permanent secretary. You have a CEO of the departments, which is the head of department, like the head of Lands and Survey and the head of Central Housing and Planning Authority. Those guys have to understand what is their law, and if they understand,
I mean, you're talking about law, and you're talking about systems and process and constitution, and we don't even have the results of an election that took place 60 days ago. So I think all this discussion is very, very convoluted. We're talking about stimulus, but we don't have a government to give us the money. We're talking about we're talking about all these things, but I think the fundamentals of our society has been totally missing or fractured. And not having the votes counted.
Well, I did a piece. I did a piece a few weeks ago that says the buck stops with the chairman of GCOM. I think I was one of the first, because it's extremely important that we move away from the narrative of trying to say, oh, Mr. Branger is responsible for this, because he can easily wiggle out of it and says, well, I am one of the contestants. I am the head of a party. This is now my job. This is GCOM's job. And he's right. Technically, he's right. Mm-hmm. Even though we know from all indication, it appears that he is pulling the string. The constitutional authority to deliver today rests with the chairman of GCOM. The buck stops with Claudette Singh, and she has to do her job. She's being paid thousands of US dollars.
Why do you think buck stops at her, and she's fully empowered, fully funded, and fully equipped? She's unable to get a count or at least decide on a count.
I do not believe his incompetence. Everybody's saying that Claudette is incompetent. I do not believe she's incompetent. I believe she's unwilling to move the process at the required pace, because there's a lot of competing forces. And clearly, she's exhibited some level of loyalty to a side. And because of that undue loyalty to a side, she is basically struggling to step forward. And this is the main reason. I mean, Claudette, don't tell me Claudette do not know the law, when the law clearly says, Article 15 of 2000, which clearly empowers her to ignore the court. She has the power to ignore the court and press on in getting the job done. Now, I was in the room. I think, Salim, you were in the room too, when Mingo did what he did, which is artificially inflate numbers in favor of the AP and UAFC. And unfortunately for the small parties and the PVP, they took away votes from those parties. So I'm expecting this recount, a lot of parties will get additional votes. So in Region 4. So the reality is, when that was happening, I know parties, personnels called the chairman, and she refused to come and witness the abuse. And that is what happened. She just decided that I'm going to isolate myself in an ivory tower and be absolved from this entire crisis. It's none of my business, but it is her business, because the buck stops with her. Wherever, I mean, tonight the US ambassador was on television, and the word she used, gravely disappointed. I mean, everybody who was in that room, including the US ambassador, will be feeling the same thing because I want to tell a truth tonight. So let me tell you a truth. I'm sorry, if you permit me 2 minutes. We were sitting in the room at Ashman Buildings on the 14th. Myself, there were many people, says Gunraj, Nigel Hines from Change Guyana and so forth. And the US ambassador was there. So Mingo came in and says, we're ready for the continuation. So I particularly stand up and says, well, sir, can you give us the opening balance that we left off at so we can continue? Because we can't start from an abstract. And he said, well, I don't have an opening balance. I said, well, sir, how are we really adding to the total? Because we got to start from somewhere. We finished 421 boxes, and we're happy with that tabulation. So let's get the totals for these 421 box so we can start adding until we reach to the 8th, 7th, and 9th box. He said, well, I don't have those opening balance because I was in hospital. But guess what? I'm going to start from box number 1 again. Are you happy with that? Everybody says, yeah, you're tacking on 2 more days to us, but we're going to do it. Let's do it. Bling, 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 the phone rang. And Mr. Mingo left the room for 2 minutes. 2 short minutes. Came back and he said, I will not start. And he started banging on the desk hard. This is a church leader, right? He is the leader of a church. Start banging on the desk hard, like if he's in a rum shop. I shall not restart from the start. I shall do it my way. And I do not want to hear anything from any of y'all. I'll take no questions. And he said, call the numbers, miss. I think it was Miss Murray. And she started to call the number like if she was in a racetrack. We couldn't even keep up with her. And the point is, the numbers were all inflated for the APNU. I was showing the ambassadors behind me. Behind me were the US ambassador, the OAS representative, the UK ambassador. Prime Minister Bruce Golding was there sitting watching this, showing them the numbers on the statement of poll, how it was being inflated by between 80 to 150 votes for the APNU. And it was being stolen from a combination of parties, from the PPP to the small parties. I mean, I think the party that got really hit was the LJP. They were losing a lot of votes, especially in places like St. Godward's Mission and so forth. So it's kind of sad that you were even willing to steal from the little baby, the little new parties. And that is what happened. And this is what Ms. Claudette Singh refused to acknowledge and refused to act on.
And therefore, we're 60 days into the wilderness until today. Nicholas, in terms of the economy and investment and Guyana's credit worthiness and ability to get international foreign loans for businesses like yours and others who are going to be building up for the oil sector and so on. What's worse? I know COVID probably is not going to be a factor when they're going to check your credit worthiness, but how much of a factor has been the political impasse as it relates to the economy and these factors?
Well, I think Nick hit the nail on the head. I'll be very short here, Nick. Nick basically said that there's a confidence crisis, and that's what it brought. Yes, Nick.
The thing is that you could use what's going on with the World Bank loan and the $5 million that we are seeking to help respond to the COVID crisis. That application has been pending for as long as they've applied for it, and everybody's being coy about discussing what's going on with it. Clearly, and if you look at it, the government. The current government is in its caretaker state hasn't been able to access the funds sitting in the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, I think it is, that from the sale of the oil, the first lift of oil, the 55 million, plus they're supposed to be getting the royalties for the first set of sales from the other members of the consortium, and you haven't seen them being able to reach or tap into that fund. So clearly, to me, it's telling me that they have problems accessing international finance, whether it be from the multilaterals, so like the World Bank, the IMF, or from their let's say the country's own funds from the proceeds of oil. So to me, that's a worrying and troublesome sign. And
Mhm.
so that is the government looking to borrow funds or having its own, foreign exchange reserves. When you to start, you know, having headlines with threat of sanctions, every foreign investor who is in a very interesting situation because you have the COVID-19 is hitting the world at the same time, right? So everybody is re-looking at very risky investments. And then when you look at, Guyana now would have been a net petroleum exporter. So our economy and oil prices now are very related. And it used to be an inverse relation because we were buying a lot of the heavy fuel oil to run GPL generators. Now we're going to be exporting far more oil than we were importing. And of course, you got the fact that we were importing a refined grade of oil where we exporting is crude petroleum. But that aside, the thing is a lot of investors are now looking at us very cautiously. And I've talked with a number of businesses who have said, you know what, we just don't think that this year, a lot of foreign businesses saying that this year is the right year to go, to go into Guyana. We were thinking about it, but given the political situation, the coronavirus, we're going to hold off. Now, luckily, they haven't said never. So nobody said, well, Guyana's fallen off the map. We're never going to approach Guyana. We're not touching it with a 10-foot pole. But definitely what they said is, look, with this COVID crisis on, as well as the fact that, you have this election crisis, 2020 for us and bringing funds into Guyana to start these investments, that's off the table. Let's look at pushing this off into 2021. And you start to look at the language as well from ExxonMobil concerning their next set of developments, which is they have the Liza 2 development that is already been approved and in process. And then you have the Liza 3 development, which has passed Exxon's board, but they were waiting on they're waiting for government approval, to then go ahead and make the final investment decision and move ahead with the project. But we haven't gotten that approval from government, and now Exxon's board seems to be thinking, okay, well, there may be some delays on this, and there may be some pushback, especially in this oil price environment. So what that says is that, going back to recap, international borrowings from the government, you're definitely seeing some floundering there, and then foreign direct investment coming into Guyana, you're seeing basically people go from very hot to lukewarm to ice cold now, and I think it's going to be a challenging year for us. I think we may have lost Salim there, but
Okay, well,
sis,
I just
you
just
tell me.
wanted to
I
respond.
believe.
Just I
Mhm.
think you hit the nail on the head, and I just wanted to respond to that because I believe honestly that some creative way of should have been taken, some creative action should have been taken to subsidize the SMEs in distress right now, because as we saw, as I'm seeing in Georgetown, and you're seeing as the head of the chamber. Um, Commercial Georgetown is in distress. And more so, the small companies are in real distress. And there has to be some kind of policy action. And the problem is we don't have a full government. We have a de facto government. And that is why we're struggling on policy front. I was just reading this this order that came out of the we call it the Gazette today, the one for the 29th. And so you were right.
Yeah,
They
the
have
publicly
basically
acquiring the
they
ocean view
basically bought
property.
that building. Now the question is, do they have the authority to buy that building? I mean, the question is, that is a mega investment, $1 billion going to be going down the drain. And the question is, was a feasibility study done? Is it the right location and property for a sanatorium for COVID patients? And the problem is they've made a $1 billion decision without actually doing the proper analytics. And this is the kind of inefficiencies that you will have in a country when you have a de facto government who does not have the authority of the people behind them. And you know what? A lot of people keep saying, "Oh, we have." It's one of the things I really do not understand the Guyana local media on, is that they keep calling every Tom, Dick, and Harry minister this and minister that. But when you look at the law is absolutely clear. There's only three office holders in government: the president, the leader of the opposition, and the attorney general. Everybody else has lost their role upon the dissolution of parliament. And I believe strongly that we should surcharge some of these ministers and permanent secretaries for all expenses incurred by the office of the minister during that period that is assigned to keeping some of these individuals functional, because they are illegally functioning in those roles. And that should be called out. But one of the things that I've also noticed in that order is that I was expecting GCOM to be designated an essential service. But I'm seeing the hospitals, immigration, judiciary, parliament, diplomatic corps, revenue, maritime, national emergency operations, water supply, the army, the police, the prison, solid waste, Demerara Harbor Bridge. And I'm not seeing GCOM on that list. Security service, telecoms, port, transportation of dry goods, construction services for health facilities, food supply agencies. But I am attorney at laws, but I'm not seeing GCOM. So how are we doing this recount if they're not deemed an essential service? So what this means, all the persons who will be at the convention center doing recount will have to sleep at the convention center, because if you're catching a minibus and there are people who are functioning on behalf of the political parties who will be catching a minibus, those people will have to sleep at the convention center because they have no leverage. And the thing that we see happening now is, I'm told that police are stopping people who are on the road during the curfew, who are taking their wife to the hospital, and these guys are getting into trouble. So obviously, it's another ploy. And this is the kind of inefficiencies I am really, really concerned about, because, you know, I understand you got to try, where there's tricks, you have to have some tricks. But this is now infantile stupidity on the part of Team Granger of trying to use these things when everybody know what is your end game. I mean, everybody's aware that they're trying to stall, delay, and not deliver on elections. But the problem is, we are in a constitutional lacuna. We don't know where we are. And the problem is, they will continue to make suboptimal decisions, because think about it. When last have you seen Mr. Granger on the press or meeting the people? He don't. He has no time with the people. He's just locked away somewhere, totally ignoring the crisis in this country. That is what you call leadership. I don't call that leadership. So, on a serious note, I really believe that we need to hurry up, conclude the count, get a legitimate government in place so that they can start doing the three-stage process, which is the short-term support, the medium-term stabilization process, which will unleash the private sector, the full potential of the private sector, and then finally the long-term measures like the national development projects. We need to get low-cost electricity and reliable one. So that's a long-term project. A Mile of Falls, a road to Brazil, a Deepwater Harbor. These are all essential projects that need to start being formulated, and we can't formulate it in the middle of this crisis that we're having. What's your thoughts, Steve?
Well, I'll tell you, so the first thing is, I've seen a lot of people sharing the final recount plan for the elections. and they're definitely going to be only working 10 hours a day to get this recount done. And of course, the time limit we're going to run up against is that they have probably a max of 25 days that they can keep any international observers here, because these people will be their leaving their homes to come here, stay and observe our recount. So that is the first. The second thing is that, of course, when we start to take a 30,000 foot view of what's going on, what we see is that we have two crises that are confronting us. One is man-made, the other is just a force of nature in the
Mm.
virus. The man-made crisis is the one that we can affect very quickly to, knock that out the way, and that is the recount. The virus is going to be with us until we have a vaccine, and
Mm.
being able to have the economy first, and of course foremost, I want to make sure that everybody understands my highest priority when I talk about this crisis is the preservation of life. However, where I think I differ a little, and so we had some internal discussions at the chamber, and my council members have recommended, and they are very much in support of the extension of the curfew orders. For me, while that was the majority view, it was not my view, but I go with the consensus and I go with the majority view because that's the point of having a council, and I defer to their wisdom together, or collective wisdom. But what I see and what I want to at least I forced to put on the table is that at some point the economy is going to have to reopen. And
Yep.
I don't want to say that it's going to have to reopen pre-March in terms of the normalcy in which we were all going about our business in February. But it's going to have to open. So I guess what I'll say is that businesses like restaurants and bars and gyms are probably going to remain closed, and probably going to and may indefinitely remain closed at this point. You just don't know what to say about those businesses because they're on the front line of the pandemic. Now, businesses such as, small retail, wholesale traders, you know, other businesses that provide services that can allow some amount of opening that don't, by their natural operation, their day-to-day activities, put people at the type of risk that a crowded bar would put people at. Having those businesses open for limited number of hours, having them put measures in place to protect both the employees who will be working there as well as the customers who are coming in. We're seeing this battle play out in places like Europe and the US, who are struggling now. They have down for over, maybe 2 months, approaching three, starting to have to look at reopening the economy and how they protect those workers. I think the famous, the one that's really grabbing a lot of attention are the meat packers in the US, and being able to put, safety measures in place for the workers in those meat packing plants so that they can go to work and do their job effectively. For us, we're going to have to go through. And I wanted my guys, and they agreed with me, that yes, I agree with the stay at home orders, the shelter in place orders, the curfew orders, call them what you want. But at some point, we are going to run into the decision of how do we open perhaps in a phased manner, and how do we open in a safe manner, and which businesses we know for sure, at least for another few months, are definitely not going to be reopened. And then we now have to craft the stimulus plans
Yep.
in place to support those businesses, because clearly the tourism and hospitality industry needs stimulus. There is no question about that. But what we have been getting so far is kind of the pat on the back, keep a stiff upper lip, because a lot of the measures the government has taken is they have removed taxes that they put on in the recent years. So they've removed things like VAT on water and VAT on electricity. This is the way I wanted to kind of break it down to the ordinary person listening. It's the equivalent of me, and my background is retail at National Hardware. So it's equivalent of me selling you a hammer and saying, because you can't afford this hammer, I'm going to reduce the price of the hammer. where we are in this point, the people need free hammers. They don't need a hammer being sold to them at lower cost. They need it free. They need it in their hands. So, we need stimulus. We need just physical checks or cash being put in, like cash grants to families who have a certain number of kids, the same way the government was doing cash grants to uh, people for the children for school uniforms. You need those type of cash grants to the workers in the tourism and hospitality industry. Trying to say, okay, well, you know what? Never mind, you've been laid off. You have no salary coming in. Here's a discount on the cost of your electricity. That doesn't mean anything to them. They need it free at this point. And when I was studying economics at the University of Virginia, one of the things that always stuck in my mind about the Great Depression in the US and John Maynard Keynes' response to it, he said in the long run, we're all dead, right? So the thing is that we need to do things and we need to put spending in place now and then later worrying about the reckoning, later worry about how do we deal with the debt we would have racked up during this period of trying to stimulate the economy and provide the social net and social protection for these workers who are very vulnerable, right?
I
Because
tend to agree with you. And the reason being is that what is really needed now is the acceleration of aggregate demand. But I saw Dr. Rupnarayan who just asked a question, what about the agriculture sector? And I want to just recognize Dr. Rupnarayan's question because being part of the Dr. Irfan Ali's national task force in response to COVID, I was able to see firsthand what is happening in the agriculture sector. Sugar is at work, even though it's producing at a lower level. And rice is also at work. Rice is right now being exported out of this country. So there is some level of activity. Of course, it's not going to be at the level that was pre COVID 19 because workers are not going out as often as they want to or they should be because people are taking protective action. But also, the economy is just in a lackadaisical mode right now. So, how do we stimulate the agriculture sector right now? I believe it's moving on. I think where more need needs right where the need really is right now to stimulate aggregate demand is exactly where you identify, Nick, and that is at the vulnerable group. People need a break um, in their utility bills. People need a break on feeding their families. People need a break on ensuring that their mortgages are not running into delinquency. And one of the things we recommend in our task force under Dr. Ali was a deferral of loan payment for 6 months and interest-free loans to help small and medium-sized businesses where I think the state will come in somewhere in trying to service the interest element of it. But for the business, the small business, it's literally interest free, whereby they use it for working class to basically recapitalize their business at this point in time. We also recommended waiver of import duties on COVID-19 medical supplies. We also recommended zero rating taxes on sanitary products. And we also referred deferring of all tax settlements by 6 months. So people don't have to worry about all these things. They need to focus on the basic in the Maslow triangle: feed, clothe, and house their families. Because over the next 3 months, that is all we should be focused on. How are we going to feed our family? How are we going to house them? And well, clothes is basic, but how are we going to make sure they're safe medically and away from this COVID crisis? And
but
and that's the focus.
Tracy says, I mean, I've talked to a number of small businesses, and the thing is that really, I agree with everything you say there as economic recommendation, but the issue is the reality we're running up against because you would have thought that with monetary policy, it's very easy. All the government has to do is to give the banks a guarantee that, look, we're going to give, up to about 10 billion Guyana dollars. We're going to guarantee all your non-performing loans, right? You just keep lending, and whenever you get a certain set of non-performing loans, put that aside. When you put that aside, we're going to hand you back cash for it, and you go on and continue to lend again, and we'll take over the non-performing loans. Because some of those, their non-performing loans are going to be stratted into some that may pay within this year, some that may pay within the end of next year, and some may just never pay at all. And the some that may never pay at all, well, the state can eat that because it may not be 100% of all the bank's non-performing loans right now. Now, what I have been seeing is that a lot of the small businesses have come to me and they're telling me they're still operating under the normal central bank rules right now. One business was telling me that the banks were coming down on them for their overdraft becoming hardcore. Which
Mm.
so just to give my background, I worked as an analyst for Wells Fargo during the financial crisis in mortgage-backed securities,
Mm.
and I worked there for 2 years before completing my MBA and returning home. You know, when first time I ever heard of the term hardcore was when I got to hear, and it is some sort of archaic thought process that if the company is not rotating their overdraft facility, meaning they're completely paying it off and take it back and paying it off and taking it back, then that amount is hardcore and they want to restructure it into a loan.
A term loan, yeah.
You know, this is they're going to create a liquidity crisis with this sort of asininity, right? This is just asininity at its highest,
It
because
is. It
I don't
is.
know where they learn monetary policy, but if this type of crisis, you just want to say, hey, you take the liquidity and you run with it, because you know it's like they don't understand that you know these businesses, and especially if you're giving them shelter and place orders, are not having, they have zero cash flow at this point. If they can't open, they're trying to probably not cut workers and maybe paying them some sort of stipend instead of their actual salary. They may be still trying to meet some of the utility payments because all they got was VAT off of it, right? So
Mm.
they may still be afraid of being disconnected from the power grid. So they're paying that. They have landlords who will be complaining to them that, sorry, I can't waive your rent this month. The banks haven't given me an ease on my mortgage, so your rent is due. So the small business that's renting from the landlord, who's the capital provider and the asset owner, he's getting squeezed. So now he goes back to the bank, and what the bank is telling him, well, you know what? I'm sorry, I can't accommodate you. The central bank is telling me that I need to tighten up. It's like, for me, it's absolute madness. If if I were
And
there in control of the Ministry of Finance, this is the time to just loosen up monetary policy, and then we'll have to figure it out after. Because I don't think, for me, I don't think these guys ever saw an environment where you can put rates almost down to zero and you won't see inflation in this type of environment. You're
yeah.
fighting deflation right now.
Well, the big challenge is, I think you hit the nail on the head, because the vulnerable, it traditionally used to be the very poor, but the vulnerable is now escalated into small businesses. So you find that a lot of guys who were entrepreneurs at the micro level are now collapsing one after the other. Um, Taxi drivers, for instance, is one sector that is totally destroyed. And those are the guys who have a payment with the car company or with the banks, and they're all at risk of losing their car. And that's the challenge, because who's going to be hiring a taxi from Grove to Georgetown now if they're late for work? Nobody's doing it. So the challenge is, that's one sector that is really imploding. The educational sector, the private educational sector, is another sector that we're going to be hard hit because um, nobody's going to
Yep.
school. People are doing some online kind of courses, but with parents struggling to put food on the table and knowing fully well that the kids do not have to go to the private schools, they it just says, well, you know what? Let's do some homeschooling. Mommy and daddy's home this term. We're going to teach you. So the education sector is another sector that is going to get a heavy hit. But I think you're right. You're absolutely right. The best practice that I've seen around the world, especially in Europe and North America, is people are now worried about the debt right now. What people are focused on is to make sure that we get in front of the COVID crisis, which is a medical and a technical issue, which only mainly medical professionals can solve, not politicians. Then the second thing is ensuring that aggregate demand is stimulated in the economy. That would require some strong measures to be able to prop up businesses, and we can be very creative. I mean, we don't necessarily say suppose there's no they believe that they can't cut checks for everybody. Then why is GPL not waiving a month, as you rightly said, of electricity bill on every small business? It's easy to establish who the small business
I mean,
is.
say the government just need to write subvention for the operational cost of GPL. Stop. Don't take the revenue in at this point, because the thing is that we are still in that twilight zone where the crisis is now starting. So we've been really experiencing a curfew more than a lockdown, because some non-essential businesses have been taking a risk to try and open. When we truly experience a lockdown because the number of cases start to escalate, which is inevitable at some point, and that cash flow stops. And it's kind of like when you're a kid and you play musical chairs and the music stops and everybody's rushing to find a seat. you know, these businesses are going to be rushing to find cash flow, and that's when the real panic is going to set in, and the real type of because for me, I actually you know there's a whole area to dig into, because if you go and start to look down at how much the Bank of Guyana is running an overdraft and basically borrowing from the commercial banks to fund the government's operation. Now, what that means is that the actual leverage in terms of the amount of loans created to a physical dollar backing up that loan, so the money multiplier, is being stretched. Now, what happens in this type of pandemic if people start to run and go for cash because for some reason the banks start to call in loans, and then somebody wants to go, because we have a very our society is very cash based. They like to see physical dollars in their hands. So if they're now walking and you start pulling out deposits, you got on the other side, you got the bank calling in loans, and people get squeezed in the middle, and then you get into a bank run scenario. And the government itself has over leveraged, this money multiplier, the fractional reserve banking system. So now you can have a case where you could actually collapse the whole financial system. So the thing is that right now you need to really just ease monetary policy. You need to take bold steps, like saying, well, GPL, we're going to write subvention checks for all your operational costs for this month and next month. Don't even go out to ask the people for sales on power, and do things that are bold, but give people the confidence that, look, you need to shelter in place for one more month. Let's control the spread of the pandemic. Let's flatten the curve. We want you focused on preserving life, because on the reverse side, if you really get out of control, our healthcare system cannot handle large amounts of infected persons at the same time. The Ocean View Hospital Hotel will not be built, and people will then will be forced to shelter in place. Overloaded, you would have the overloaded healthcare system, and it's going to be a mess. It's really going to be a mess.
All right,
And
Nick,
what
I think we
we
need to take a break, a commercial break. We'll be back in about a few minutes. Thank you, Devin, taking over the show.
January marks 1 year since Globespan 24x7 embarked on this initiative to offer a platform that brings in all sides, all points of view, and all concerns. Viewers in Guyana and across the world are participating in discussions that are bringing to light issues relating to social, economic, and political matters that have been plaguing our nation. Globespan's platform offers Guyanese to express their concerns and discuss solutions in the political realm, thereby addressing the polarized situation. Discussions also include social ills, such as alcoholism, domestic violence, and suicides that have been plaguing the people. The platform also mitigates the brain drain by having speakers that live in Guyana and across the world participate in these discussions. This concept will avail a broader view for the benefit of all Guyanese, so Globespan needs your support to offset the expenses. Kindly contribute by clicking the link in the description to help support these programs.
So, thank you very much, Globespan, and thank you very much, Singh, for hosting us tonight, along with the technical support from Delvin in New York. We've been having some technical difficulties where we lost Salim, but we're veteran professionals, so we know that we know how to do this. But I want to share an experience I had, Nick, and I want you to respond to it. I've noticed that, and I've been talking to a lot of families as we were distributing hampers, and they were basically saying, hey, you know what? We did some panic buying in the run-up to the elections, because we know Guyana with elections always have economic uncertainties. So a lot of people dived into their savings and buy, loads of food to make sure that they don't have to come on the road, just in case they had elections day and subsequent activities that are not healthy for them. They didn't foresee, on February 29th, nobody foresee COVID-19. Upon COVID-19 happening, they did some additional panic buying, further depleting their savings. Now, a lot of these families are telling us now they're literally exhausted their savings in the bank. Over 30,000 people have been temporarily let go. Some of it permanent, but most of them are temporary, where they're getting, as you said, a small stipend that is not going to feed them for that month, but something to keep them ticking, but it's not enough to feed their family. So there's a lot of people in Guyana who are actually being forced into poverty. Luckily, they have a good stock of food because of this panic buying, but they have no savings, they have no income, they have no active job, and bottom line is their asset base is depleting. And this is the challenge. If these people do not get back to work, it will have an adverse effect on the economy. And the only way they can get back to work, even in the shutdown, is that we need to bring back. We have three problems in Guyana happening simultaneously. And this is a unique situation. While the United States is dealing with COVID-19 alone, and all the other countries are dealing with that, and some are dealing with two items, we're dealing with three crises. We're dealing with, as a first-time oil producer, we basically saw our income disappeared. So we can't even count on oil now. We're dealing with a political crisis that has brought in great uncertainty and destroyed business confidence in the economy. And we're dealing with a COVID crisis which does not have an official, an effective policy response from the de facto government. And it's basically the private sector and the political opposition is trying to do their bits in their different islands. And it is helping, but it's not coordinated. And that is the challenge. Guyana needed a national coordinated effort to ensure that resources are being deployed efficiently to the right people at the right time, so that we can help them to stay above the curve. Because, as you rightly said, our most important resources are people. We can't afford to lose our people right now to COVID or to depression, or as you can see, there's an upswing right now in social violence in Guyana. People are murdering their families at home. It's a crazy situation. And to compound that, the criminals are still around. So the appeal is that GCOM has to help us fix one of these problems. The others, COVID, we can't really fix until, as you rightly said, we got to get a vaccine. But if we fix the political problem quickly, it will then give us, empower the entire country to coordinate the COVID approach, because it's very disjointed right now as a country.
I, and that's, we can't do much about the coronavirus except put in shelter in place, orders, monitor how we open back up the economy in a phased approach, put in the necessary healthcare facilities, equipment, train personnel towards the coronavirus, much as the rest of the world is doing. What we need to do though is clean up this election, issue. The joke everyone is making the total be is we're dealing with GCOM 20 and COVID 19. You know, and the thing is that we can get over GCOM 20. Corona then allows us a government in place, fully functioning, to bring budgets to Parliament to say that, look, because of the situation in the economy, we're going to go on massive spending. And, we're just going to have to take the risk. We're going to have to do deficit spending. We're going to have to borrow.
Mhm.
And we're going to just try our best to reflate the economy. We're going to bring down, interest rates as low as possible. And we're going to work to provide liquidity to the banks and to the economy, and let's get through 2020 and 2021 and see, how things go. Of course, once you get back to a normal situation, that's when the government will have to do its unwinding and its pullback and say, well, we gave you in 2020 to 2021, you're going to have to pay some taxes and bring back down the borrowing and the debt
Mhm.
levels that the government is going to have to embark on. But we need that deficit spending. We need that loose monetary policy now, and it will allow us to do the things like shelter in place safely. It will allow families who, if you hand them direct cash grants, allow them to be able to stay at home for longer periods so that they don't have to start coming up for air, meaning try to go back to work to meet immediate need cash flow.
Yeah.
And, and
Yeah.
we got the
When Salim called me on this show, he asked me, what do you think is the economic impact that had happened for 2020? So I had done a model many years ago when we had the Great Flood, on trying to model the economy. I used to be at Bank of Guyana then, and I pulled out the model and did some rejigging of it to update it. And I got 3 months supply of data out to the Bank of Guyana. And I was shocked at what came out. And I talked to some professionals around the system, and they all kind of actually think I was being too optimistic, because based on the computation that I used, based on the data sourced from the Bank of Guyana, the economy is going to shrink by about 20%, or not is going to, has shrunk by 20% in the first 3 months of 2020. 20% of this economy has disappeared. Um, and they're actually telling me it's more, but the model is telling me 20% has disappeared. And clearly there's been a 70% decline in the oil prices, which means that what everybody was counting on, this big oil revenue, it's disappearing. It's actually, we were supposed to get about 300 million US dollars. If we get 105 million US dollars in 2020 from oil, we get a lot. But this brought me to this important point. So while everybody should be focused on 2020, the short-term plan, the support program, I am also wanting to encourage all to start formulating in your mind what are the sectors you're going to focus on in the medium term as your priority, because the elections will be declared. Whether we like it or not, it will be declared. GCOM will have to declare the results. And I would want to recommend that once those results are declared and the short-term support program is in place, we should really embrace the private sector in 5 sectors. And the 5 sectors I want to encourage any policymaker to embrace the private sector is the technological sector. The first thing is the telecoms monopoly must be broken. We must allow competition to flourish in that sector because Guyana has a great potential because we're on New York time zone and we speak English. We have a great potential in the BPO and IT outsourcing sector. Let's leverage that potential. The other thing that we really need to get back to is celebrating the 6 sisters, which is the 6 industries that really fueled Guyana for the last since independence to now. Making sure that we bring greater efficiency to them by moving them up the value chain, so that rather than selling raw rice that I saw this week being exported at DDL Wharf, let's sell rice cereal to the Caribbean. Rather than selling raw gold to Canada, let's sell jewelry to India. And those kinds of that kind of methodology. The mining and construction sector, of course, got to be embraced, but very, very important. We got to get manufacturing and the electricity sector back.
Yeah,
You know,
power and infrastructure. Because the thing that I've always said is that I've met a lot of foreign direct investors over the past year. I've always said energy, infrastructure, and education, are the things that we need to really invest in, because energy allows us to bring down the power costs and allows us to improve or increase the level of manufacturing that's done. Because when you start to look at the profits from manufacturing, a lot of it is just going back into the cost of energy, as well as the cost of logistics. The cost of logistics and transportation, because particularly for us, CARICOM and northern Brazil are some of the best target markets for us right now. When you look at the cost of shipping a container of something produced here to Barbados, or it's more expensive to ship from Guyana to Barbados or to Jamaica than it is to import from Miami to Jamaica or Miami to Guyana. So we are starting at a natural disadvantage that other Latin American producers who produce and then warehouse in countries like Panama or the U.S. It would be South Florida, and then ship into the Caribbean. We're at a logistical disadvantage, and the cost of logistics is expensive. If you think about rice that's grown in Berbice has to be trucked to Georgetown to then be exported. This is absolute madness.
it's madness.
So if you're sending out 15,000 tons of rice, there's 15,000 tons of rice that has to come by road, from a major river to the Demerara to then be shipped out. So the energy, the infrastructure, and then the education level, because
but can you imagine the guys who are shipping rice out from Esquibo? They got a bigger problem.
Yeah, it's madness. So and then you got the education level where we need to invest in the education to get skilled workers. I mean, we won't need 1,000 PhD workers, but we're gonna need a lot of skilled technicians. We're gonna need a lot of skilled engineers, because whether it is manufacturing, whether it's construction, whether it's mining, we need those types of professionals in the industry.
Yeah. I wanted to take the conversation, because we're wrapping up in about 10 minutes, towards the long-term sector, because let's share ideas around the big projects that are required. I remember during the elections campaign, Mr. Granger had gone out on his platform saying he will be the man to deliver the decade of development. And I was like wondering to myself, well, you wanted to give us 10 years of development, but you're hiding from us over the last 3 months on this COVID crisis. How are you going to deliver a development model when we can't even get you to deliver on the COVID-19 model? So, but in a decade of development, and which I want to encourage Guyana get into 10-year planning is that we need to map out clearly a road to Brazil, a deep water harbor, a new road to the airport with minimal interference, meaning not many intersections, so that you could get to the airport in 20, 30 minutes. A Milo Falls Hydro Project, a bridge to Hog Island. A lot of people are not thinking about a bridge to Hog Island, but it will revolutionize the way we do trade with Essequibo if we have a bridge to Hog Island. Because the whole of the Hog Island is underutilized as an island, and you know Hog Island is bigger than Barbados. The road to Bartica by way of the Del Conte Road. Let me just give you two other projects that I believe should be mapped into our 10-year project. We have the MMA Part 1, which is Borbis River to Abari Creek, or Abari River, completed. It has been able to produce large amount of new lands for farmers. MMA Phase 2 has never been completed, and it was supposed to be completed since 1978. Now is the time we should really put that into our plan and get it done so that we can produce, we can reveal thousands of new acreage to the farmers. Then most importantly, something that Noel Holder failed to do, even though he promised to do it, is the unleashing of the intermediate savanna, opening it to plantation agriculture for niche crops designed to get into large chains around the world like Whole Foods Fresh Market. Why not? Why can't we open up the intermediate savanna to plantation agriculture that can feed the Caribbean, northern Brazil, as you suggested, and North America, using technology that is there now? So take it away.
Well, you know, the thing is, the way I would summarize it is that we have, you know, extractives, we got agriculture, and we got services. Or maybe if I rearrange and go C, you know, SEA, so services, extractive, and agriculture. Extractives are going to dominate because right now gold, you know, where the gold price is definitely going to dominate the exports. And of course, you expect at some point a recovery in the oil price that takes it above $30, $35 a barrel, probably 40, and anything above that is just cream. You know, you get an oil price there, the extractives will really dominate. Hopefully, what we do is invest into the infrastructure and push the agriculture, because as you're saying, you know, we open up all these lands, additional lands for agriculture. How we open them up is by building more roads. So if we build a deep water port where we can get larger ships to come in, then we build more roads so that we can get products to that port and get it out in, you know, larger vessels, so the cost of transportation is reduced. It makes us a better agriculture producer, so that we can start to tackle CARICOM and say, hey, you know, any rice that's coming into the CARICOM region that's not Guyanese rice needs to get some sort of like 40, 50%, 60% tariff, right? And then when they turn around and challenge us and say, hey, can you produce it? We say, hey, look, here's all the acreage that's ready for cultivation. Here's all the drainage systems and everything ready for you. We can get you how much of 1,000 tons. You know, here's how much sugar you import, whether it's white, you know, white sugar. We'll get it to you. You need arable lands that are efficient to get to. You need educated farmers who are not farming on a subsistence level, and that can be fueled by investing what we earn from the extractive industry. And if we get services as a byproduct of that, for instance, you got construction is considered a service. You have, you know, IT sectors that may come online with things we haven't thought of, or things that you host, for instance, business process outsourcing. So the future is bright, but getting past this election is the biggest roadblock as a local business person wanting to reinvest into my country. And there are many others like me, and there are many others outside of the country who share no affiliation but see the opportunity. But everybody just wants to say, look, the politics is getting in the way. Get rid of it.
All right, Nick is 8:55. We're trying to shut down at 9. So can you offer some concluding remarks?
Well, you know, sis, I think that going off the vein I just said is that I think the future is bright, but we have to get past this election. The coronavirus will do what it is going to do, but we can take lessons from the rest of the world and the Caribbean in how to respond to it, and preservation of life is the highest priority.
Oh wow, that was pretty businesslike. I like that. I wish if more in Guyana can get to the point as quickly as you did. My take in the conclusion, I believe that Guyana needs leadership. That is the willingness to basically confront the major anxieties of our people, and our people do have a lot of anxieties today. Um, I am looking for, as a professional, a visioning of the 3 to 6 months and then for the rest of the year, as you keep saying, let's focus on 2020. I'm looking for leaders to make sense of what is happening. I have seen some really positive statements coming out of Dr. Irfan Ali, and I want to celebrate that. And I also am pleased that at least he is relating to the crisis of the people. And now is the time for everyone to step up and make sense of this situation. What I'm looking for is fresh ideas, and I'm really happy that we had this conversation today, because at least I know that the private sector, the chamber in particular here, does have some fresh ideas. They kind of get it, so they're getting out there talking to their members and understanding what is going on. So they're bringing those ideas to the table, and I know that you guys are formulating strategies. But I am very, very concerned that GCOM has not gotten it. GCOM, I think, has not grasped what they're doing to this country economically. I think they're only buried in the legal and political sphere. And those things have the risk of their own. But economically, GCOM is doing a lot of damage to this country. And I'm appealing to good sense to prevail. I wish if the chairman, Claudette Singh, can understand her role properly and get the job done and understand the rules of this game today, because Guyana is actually falling apart when we compare ourselves to the rest of the Caribbean on this COVID fight. And we do not need that. I understand people have issues with regards to, they don't want to lose power and so forth. But tough, we have to listen to the people, and we have to tabulate, we have to declare, and then we have to talk. All sides need to sit down and talk. And on that final note, I just want to say good night to everyone, and thank you very much, Nick. I'm sorry that Salim's computer is acting up, but hopefully next time we'll get him on it. And Devin, and I want to thank Nohar Singh and Globespan, the Globespan 24x7 family. Thank you very much for supporting this program and funding it. And we're always looking out for support and funding for Globespan. And I'm appealing to all the business community to do sponsor some shows on Globespan. So good night to all. Have a good evening.
Thanks to all, and thanks.